Joan E Rotten here. We're going to keep talking about Juliet of the Spirits. So I've gathered some more tabs of information I want to share with you about this movie. And then I'd also like to try to break it down a little bit more. So I found this movie really interesting. Let me read this for a second. And if you saw that other video I just did, you saw a lot of occult symbolism in the little trailers. And so I just thought, out of curiosity, I would type in, Juliet of the Spirits, occult symbolism, thinking that I would get other people talking about the amount of symbolism that's in there. I don't know, just something on a different side to it. Surprise, surprise, that isn't what I found. So I wanted to pull up this because I wanted to just share some. I went through the tabs, but when you type this in, this isn't what you get. In fact, the very second one you get right here, so the first one is just 25 years later. Then we got the Wikipedia, and then we've got visions of unconsciousness. Missing occult must include occult. Missing it. None of these have occult in them, is what I'm saying. And when you go to the next page, oops, that's not what I meant to do. You are off now. You don't find anything. Got this. So now you're talking about totally different things, and it's not about the movie. So I found that interesting, and so I decided to dig a little further. And so I clicked on some of those links that were on that first page. 25 years later, site.com. First time Fellini, Juliet of the Spirits. A desperate housewife indeed. This is by a blogger that talked about the movie. I have a confession to make. I've gone through my entire life and never seen a Fellini film. I take great shame in this statement because there's really no good reason why I've avoided Fellini for all of these years. I am into art films. I love David Lynch, who counts Fellini as among his influences. I've heard his name brought up every time someone discusses the greatest directors of all time. I love foreign films and surrealism, so why haven't I seen one of his movies before now? I don't know why. So then he goes on, he gets the movie to watch, and he says this. So recently I decided I was going to start randomly picking a film, and he picked Juliet of the Spirits. That's the first one he picked, which we just talked about, that being connected to a B-52 song. The verdict, I absolutely loved this movie. I've seen some negative reviews on the film that indicate that it's the beginning of Fellini's decline as a director. But if this is considered to be his decline, then I can't wait to see his other great movies. And so he has a little segment here. Juliet of the Spirits is the story of Juliet, a plucky yet rather ordinary housewife who slowly begins to suspect her husband Giorgio of having an affair. She hires a private investigator to follow him around for a week. Meanwhile, she starts spending time with her free-spirited neighbor Susie and partakes in various forms of mysticism, such as gurus and seances, to find a spiritual center in the midst of her marital dilemma. And all of this, well, here, I'll read this part, but I'm not sure exactly what Fellini was trying to say with this story. While the true meaning of the film is certainly open to interpretation, I saw it simply as a kaleidoscope menagerie of dreams, visions, and memories centering around Juliet's life as her marriage crumbles around her. All this mental and emotional chaos is presided over by a spirit named Iris. Early in the film, Julieta and some friends play around with a Ouija board while holding a seance. And Iris attaches herself to Juliet. Iris guides her throughout the film, whispering to her and leading her through the psychological abyss of grotesque freaks and distorted memories. She attempts to seek answers through various forms of mysticism in this movie, besides the aforementioned seance. She and her friends attempt a role playing exercise designed to cleanse the soul, and she visits a truly bizarre guru called the Bisima. The Bisima is sort of an elderly man woman who surrounds himself with an entourage of equally bizarre folks, spouting questionable advice to Juliet. In one of the movie's oddest and funniest scenes, the assistants, I'm going to get this, run around the room chirping and growling while he assumes a female voice and upsets Juliet by telling her that having more sex with her husband is the answer to all of her marital woes. Well, thank God he's there. And then there's Juliet's outrageous neighbor, Susie. It's not Suze, it's Susie. This woman takes pride in being a slut. She has sex with random men in a treehouse in the woods, a slide leading from her bedroom to a swimming pool, and wild costumed orgies at her house to rival Z-Mans from beyond the Valley of the Dolls. Susie sets up a sexual encounter between Juliet and a gorgeous young man at one of these orgies. But Juliet can't go through with it. She just runs back to her house and waits for her husband to get home. She knows her husband is out there somewhere sleeping with a model, but sitting at home and waiting for him is just what she knows. This poor woman is determined to wallow in misery, it seems. When I watch a surreal film such as this one, I am averse to picking apart the meaning of it. I believe that Juliet of the Spirits could mean a lot of different things to different people. Trying to give a definitive meaning to Juliet's visions implies that there is only one way to interpret this story. And I do not believe that to be so. It takes away some of the fun of the art film when you feel like there is a proper and academic meaning behind it all. In other words, we don't want little bunny foo-foo, right? We want to interpret ourselves, which is what we consider to be art, a personal interpretation of what we are seeing. It's all about what it makes you feel, what it touches deep down inside you, what it unearths inside your soul. That being said, I will give my basic opinions of Juliet's visions because they form the crux of the story. Okay. So then he goes on to talk about some of the things there, but before I move on to that, I'm going to save this for future reference. So we're going to keep going on with just the basics of what this movie is about, okay? And some of these very first pages that I was showing you. So this is the one we looked at first. We looked at the 20 years later, or 25 years later. And now we're going to look at the next one. So you can see, I'm not going to keep doing this every time. I'm showing you that all I did was just go through them. There's big screen, there, blah, blah. So I just went through these pages. So visions of the unconscious, an analysis of Juliet of the spirits. And so we're going to read what this guy has to say. Did Sigmund Freud realize the impact he would have when he first proposed the idea of the unconscious mind as a reservoir for people's dreams, memories, and thoughts that may be too violent or too sexually explicit for the conscious mind to handle? When he wrote about the animalistic ID battling the angelic superego on the battlefield of the literal ego, one wonders if he knew that he was going to spark a new way of pondering the human psyche, a way that would not only influence science, but the arts as well. Surrealism was one such impact, and from this art movement came the idea of displaying a person's memories, dreams, and hallucinations through images and sound in cinema. Filmmakers took the high art concept of irrational juxtaposing of various elements. What is that word? Juxtaposing. Look it up. What is that? Placed to deal with close together for contrasting effect. Black and white photos of the slums. Huh. Interesting. Okay. Of various elements to evoke the functions of the mind and tamed it to portray the character's psyche so the audience could better understand the person that they were watching. Controlled surrealism is seen in Federico Fellini's story about a woman caught between two worlds in Juliet of the Spirits. The protagonistic Juliet never discovered the strong self-identity moving from her nuclear family into the arms of the first love without really working out who she was, and thus her ego is underdeveloped and her superego has the most control. So when the world she knows comes apart around her, her ego finds itself besieged by polar opposites of the ID and the superego in an attempt for her mind to create a strong enough self-identity to allow her to be independent. The battle between the opposites is seen in visual representations of both the Catholic Church-controlled superego and the doctrine of the erotic love of the ID. Manifestations of these spirits either in... What is that word? You know, I haven't, what is this word? How do you say that word? Digest. Plot. Why didn't we just say that? Anyway. The world is depicted in the film or inserted within the separate there's that word again, sequences illustrated to the internal battle. The surrealism-inspired aspects of editing and mise-en-scene serve to help the spectator understand the psyche of the protagonist as she comes to grip with the true nature of love and her own heart. Academically acknowledged is Fellini's love affair with symbolism. Juliet of the Spirits is ripe with reoccurring motifs, but the main thing to note is how the repetition of said symbols is used stylistically to infer the nature of the plot as the protagonist experiences it. These symbols, most often visual, form an iconography from which can be read Fellini's central theme of the piece. In this movie, the visual iconography found in the manipulations of editing and the mise-en-scene has a surrealistic flavor, and it reveals the unconscious. So it goes on to talk about this movie. And as you can see, it is basically really just talking about, you know, this film and this woman and the struggles the duality of her struggles. So let's go to the next one. What does this say? So even though we're talking about a lot of symbolism, we're not talking about it from an occult angle. We're talking about it from a self-exploration angle, an awakening of Juliet. Here's another one. What is Federico Fellini's Juliet of the Spirits all about? Even after multiple viewings, I'm not entirely sure. I have an idea, but perhaps its meaning is immaterial. It's going to be at this place this Saturday. I don't know when that was. But anyway, they were going to do it. So he gives you a little thing. The director's wife and muse and frequent collaborator stars as the title character, a middle-aged woman torn between dedication of her husband, Giorgio, and the desire for something more from life. Hiding her feelings behind the perpetual Mona Lisa smile and an array of wide-brimmed haute couture hats, Juliet no longer finds fulfillment lounging on the beach and planning social occasions. I know the feeling. And then it even goes on to say that Fellini was deeply interested in things spiritual and metaphysical, even experimenting with LSD prior to beginning this production. For the record, he considered his acid trip a little bit disappointing. Juliet of the Spirits reflects these influences from the get-go, as Juliet and Giorgio celebrate their wedding anniversary with Genius, the world's greatest clairvoyant, and friend Val, who gives Juliet a charm designed to ward off spirits. And you can go on. Let's see. Where's the next thing? Okay. Plunging deeper into the psychobabble cults of the period, Juliet also encounters the Indian guru Bhishma, described as a man-woman with the secrets of both sexes, and a doctor who specializes in psychodrama. The value of their arcane knowledge, however, is questionable as the spirits become increasingly testy, even suggesting at one point that Juliet joined them in eternal repose. Juliet of the Spirits arguably marked the apex of Fellini's career. It's here that the seeds of the director's eventual demise were sown, but his hallmark grotesqueries are neither as sharply drawn nor as hideous as they would become in later years. Amusingly, Fellini's screenplay acknowledges what would ultimately be his undoing when Juliet's neighbor Susie announces, "I don't believe fetishism a good trait. Tell it to the judge, Federico." So again, about her sexual fiascos and her issue. This was interesting. I found a paper somebody wrote. Ivana Gulick in Australia at the University of New England wrote Sexual Stereotypes and Personality Developments in Federico Fellini's 8.5 and Juliet of the Spirits. I'm only going to read the abstract. This study aims to readdress Fellini's reputation in the feminist critical discussion. Feminist perspectives on Fellini's cinema use his stereotypical depiction of women to make a strong case for the negative in assessing Fellini's gender representation. Using 80 and Juliet of the Spirits as points of reference, the argument will proceed that Fellini's one-dimensional portrayal of women is directly linked to the theme of personal development. This is inspired by cultural trends of the time, amongst which the Jungian idea of individualism seemed to be the most influential on the filmmaker. Fellini's advocates of the idea of personal development through the inner liberation of individuals from outmodeled mythologies of the past. His cinematic exploration of these mythologies is invested in the stereotypical images of women that form an integral part of the aesthetic strategies and thematic concerns Fellini employs in the films to communicate the ills affecting Italians. Fellini achieves this critical position in two ways. On the level of cinematic representation that subverts dominant roles of spectership, and on the thematic level through various textual events that dramatize the themes of the cultural determinism and the need for individual liberation. So there's a scene. Oh no, so one of the next things that was on here, I'm just going down the list, click, 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 right? We just did this one. And so now I got a beach scene and it's on Pinterest. And then we have another scene that's on Pinterest. So I'm just a little curious. This is the what you get. So we're talking about maybe the symbolism, and we're talking about sexual liberation, and we're not talking about occult symbolism, Illuminati symbolism. We're talking about a director who uses symbols in his films as a form of art to display an idea. And so when you looked on that just there on Pinterest, it was interesting for me to see the things that show up. So we got, giant storks attacking a police car, a lot of Harley Quinn reference, which we will talk about. Here we've got her on the swing. We've got some images of galleries. We've got an ideal boy of good habits. I don't know how to be a bad girl in India. Eartha Nitt playing in the trees. You know, we've got some, just the imagery is odd. You know, it's kind of freak showish. You know, more clown, harlequin. This has nothing to do with the movie per se. This is just what's attached to it on Pinterest. And that I find interesting. What do you think of? So here's another one for costume ideas from the film Juliet. You see here a lot of occult symbolism. I mean, every time I go over this, you can see, but here we have like the you know, fan hats here, almost looking like they're synchronized swimming. She also has this ruffly kind of shell-looking cowl around her neck, which obviously looks very much like a JJ. That's just, you know, fact. That's why people think of that. We've got the little girls floating. These are the images that are brought up when looking for images that would also be connected to the film and costume ideas. So that's interesting. Let's keep going. So the Illuminati uses a lot of symbols and meaning. So I thought I'd look that up, and I came across this. I didn't know they had, like, I've never searched this stuff. I mean, I've seen it. Like, I don't really never cared that much. I thought these people are nuts. So anyway, but here you go. I didn't know if you knew this, but I just learned that Illuminati has their own website, IlluminatiOfficial.org. They had an about us. You know, what's their purpose? So I thought I'd check that out. The Illuminati is an elite organization of world leaders, business authorities, innovators, and artists, and other influential members of this planet. Not humans, just this planet. Our coalition unites influencers of all political, religious, and geographical backgrounds to further the prosperity of the human species as a whole. They're influential members of the planet, but they're here to further the prosperity of human. That just sounded weird. So they got some, oh, wait, here it is. Hang on. This I thought was, seriously? Like, they don't want me. Oh, my God. Oh, wow. It's not, see, it's not liking me today. Well, let's start it over. Stop. Because here's what I wanted to know. And the marks. Okay. They have a billionaire giving pledge. They have a book. It's called The Mark of the Illuminati. They have some of their beliefs here. The Illuminati has no belief but the sovereignty of the human species. Well, isn't that so nice of them? The Illuminati is not a church, religion, political group, or charity organization, but an elite collective of global influencers who work to further the interests of the human species as a whole. Our decisions are independent of human divisions, including religion and political differences. We operate solely for the benefit of the human species we have been entrusted to protect, and therefore make no demands of our citizens regarding personal worship, morality, or belief. They want to preserve the human species. All right, let's keep going. Oh, whatever. Anyway, they also have on that page symbols and signs. And so I did that. Masonic meanings, symbols and signs. Because when you're watching this movie, Juliet of the Spirits, you're going to see a crap ton of symbols and signs. And I've mentioned before, if you're interested in quick lessons, go to Yibo's channel. I'll put the link in the description. He has a lot of really short, quick, very interesting videos that you can check out. So here's some of the signs we all know: the floor and the globes and the golden globes and the crosses and the, you know, the triangles and the pentagrams and the sign. They pervert everything. The Bible says they do. I'm not a Bible thumper. I'm just saying that's what it says. I mean, not even pizza is sacred anymore. But Juliet, okay, so I found this. You can actually look at the scripts of movies, which I love to do. This isn't the first time I've done this. I'm admitting. So this is the synopsis, and so this is, I wanted to read this because this was another interesting take on the movie. Again, all of the takes that we're finding are discussing the movie as an artistic piece of enlightenment for a, sexually frustrated middle class housewife, kind of, 50 Shades of Grey-esque of the 1960s. So it says here, Juliet lives in a beautiful house by the ocean. Her sisters, and especially her mother, overshadow her with their beauty. She is a spiritual, superstitious, and naive woman. She visits a psychic seer who tells her she must follow the sex trade in order to be happy. I hear so much of that today. A lot of people follow a sex trade in order to be happy. Not long after she meets her eccentric and sexy neighbor, Susie, who, by all counts, appears to be a high-class prostitute, and encourages Juliet into sexual acts which make her guilty and nervous. Well, that's an interesting way to describe things. A rare night when her husband is at home, she wakes up to catch him talking to another woman on the phone. He calls out the name Gabriella while sleeping. But when she questions him, he lies his way out of it. They're liars. She finds out who Gabriella is and fears her husband will leave her. Juliet begins having visions who accuse and terrorize her. The pinnacle of visions comes at an end where it is implied she realizes she would be better off without her husband and is ultimately emotionally emancipated. It goes into the genre of comedy, drama, and fantasy. Okay, let's keep going. Fantasy and spectacle lend a timelessness to Juliet of the Spirits. It remains a timeless major work of master, a portrait of a dutiful wife plunged into crisis that triggers her spiritual awakening. With Fellini's own wife, the great Juliet Massina, as Juliet, and with his unique command of fantasy and spectacle in full force, Juliet of the Spirits, Fellini's first film in color, is at once an eye-popping display of bravura and work of compassionate insight. To see this film again or for the first time is to feel both the full measure of Fellini's talent and also the great loss to the world cinema with his death in 1993. And then his wife died 5 months later. On the eve of her 15th wedding anniversary, Juliet has spent her marriage in a state of gratitude to the handsome Giorgio, who asked her to marry him. Now in his dashing, expensively tailored, silver-haired 40s, Giorgio is a successful PR who travels a lot, almost certainly not only for work, and attracts a frivolous, bizarre socialites who seem straight out of the La Dolce Vita. Having carefully planned a candlelight dinner for two at her dollhouse perfect home near the sea, Juliet is greeted by Giorgio, who has forgotten their anniversary. But he shows up with his entourage in tow, which includes, among many others, Val, a medium who persuades Juliet and others to participate in a seance that has a decided, if mysterious, effect on Juliet. From this point on, the film flows freely between Juliet's daily life and her newly unleashed imagination, altering between dreams and fantasies. This occurs just as she has reason to suspect that her glib husband, who has become sexually indifferent to her, has a mistress. Thus commences Juliet's odyssey of self-liberation, which Fellini expresses with wit, grandeur, and humor. Oops. In addition, he draws upon his formidable familiar collaborators, blah, 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 blah. Production and costume designer, Fellini designed the chic, understated wardrobe for Juliet. while Gerard, or however you say his name, created amazing costumes for the other actresses. This is what I found interesting in this article. Decking them out in outsized picture hats and miles of feathers, ruffles, chiffons, and silks. Surely only a group this talented could have hoped to keep this visual splendor light, floating, and beguiling. The reason I like that is because she is kept, you know, understated wardrobe, whereas all of the others that are involved in the spiritual realm and his sexual liaisons have large hats and lots of makeup and miles, it says, of feathers, you know, figuratively, literally, I don't know, miles of feathers, ruffles, chiffons, and silks. So she is intimidated and overwhelmed on all sides. Her mother is an icy, ageless beauty. Her sister is an attractive TV hostess. The other is a spiritual and pregnant, insisting that Juliet hire a private detective to set the goods on Giorgio. As various gurus, including an androgynist, Eastern mystic, played by pioneering performance, whatever, are telling Juliet what to do. She is at once flooded with childhood memories and drawn to the hospitality of her gorgeous blonde neighbor, Susie, who lives in an Art Nouveau-ish palace with her Greek tycoon lover, and whose parties would not be inappropriate for a bordello. I think you get the idea, right? So it does have some sensuality, adult themes, and situations. Okay. So let's keep going about this movie, because this movie becomes more and more interesting the more I learn about it. I did find you can watch the entire video on YouTube. And there was one more thing. Let's see. Where did I see that? It was right here. Oh, my. Okay. Oh, well, anyway, I'm going to end this video here. There was one I read, and it described her as a trollop, a whore. Oh, I know where it is. Ah, here we go. Wait. No, I know where it is. Right here. So I did. I downloaded the lyrics. Oh, my goodness. The screenplay. And I was just going through and reading it along with the movie because the translation on the movie is not, you know, it's translating it almost literally from Italian, which means that it's not really as easy to follow. So I downloaded the script and I was reading it while I was watching the movie. And it described, described the women as the woman in here. Where is it? Down here. Here it is. As they're doing a seance, a man called Olaf interrupts the seance, says, "You're Turkish. Send a message for each of us to help us through this life. What can you tell our friend?" And the spirit says, "Whore." And then she repeats, "No, you've misunderstood me." And then trollop, he says, a big trollop. It isn't really an insult. He said a big trollop, right? A trollop. A woman who has many casual sexual encounters or relationships. It's not calling Juliet this. It's calling the seance lady. So with that in mind, I'm going to end this one. And I'm going to dive deeper into this movie because this is just really becoming so interesting. 1965. I'm watching video after video after video. You can search YouTube with just a couple of words and find so many descriptions of sexual abuse, pizza, all that stuff. And when you think about it, and then you find something like this from 1965, and you read what it was about, and you read what the director was trying to get across, and then you read that he loves symbolism, doesn't mention occult symbol, but he loves symbolism. And then we have a movie like this, and it is full of the symbolism that we are told today is conspiracy theories and imaginary. And then I see a movie like this, and, you know, I get curious. So go check it out for yourself, and I'll dig a little bit deeper and present another video shortly.